Thank you. First of all, thanks to organizers and thanks for interesting talks. What I will talk about is internal model of type theory, but intentional models of type theory may have been another title. To set the stage, I will start with citations from Gödel. Okay, so this was in a series of exchange letters between Gödel and Bernays about dialectica interpretation. And at some point, so there was a question about connected to Diller-Nam interpretation. And what Gödel said was, so what is necessary and in this interpretation is decidability of intentional equations between functions. And then he said that this is something non-standard. So the mathematicians will probably raise objections against this because contemporary mathematics is extensional and hence doesn't have a notion of intentions. And then he says that it's actually possible to make this notion of intentional equality technically precise. And so my talk actually will be very closely connected to this. So it will be about models of type theories that are developed in an intentional framework. So in the setting of dialectica, formula that Gödel considered where it exists for all formula and with atomic formula, and atomic formula was an equation between functionals of finite type, and it was very important for this interpretation that the atomic formula were decidable. So hence intentional equality was decidable. So this was analyzed in details by in Tate's paper about intentional interpretation of functionals of finite type. And there Tate was using, so first Tate was using the term definitional equality or intentional equality, because the idea was that, so this equality was actually definitional. So how do we check that two functional are equal? We unfold definitions and until we reach the normal form, and then we compare the normal form. So technically, so Tate was using a system of combinators. And so it was weak equality, but then he added the rule that we have f equal g if fx equal gx, where x is a variable. So we get something which is equivalent to beta-eta conversion. So this was discussed, notion of definitional equality is discussed in this paper. So at about the same time, but for rather different motivations, so De Bruijn was also introducing this notion of definitional equality. And there, so the goal was not like dialectica to analyze further the intuitionistic logic, but the goal of De Bruijn was for representing mathematical proofs on a computer. But he had the same notion of definitional equality that was beta-eta conversion. Actually. But no, instead of using functionals of finite type, it was dependent type theory. And De Bruijn contrasted explicitly, so this notion of convertibility of combinatory logic or lambda calculus or definitional equality versus what he called book equality, that was equality introduced as a constant of the type theory. And this notion of definitional equality, so it's interesting to notice that it's not present in most systems of when one presents a logical system. So for instance, if one go back to the first presentation of higher order logic by Frege, So Frege used the book equality with the Brownian terminology for representing definitions. And in implementations of HOL system, also one uses book equality for representing definitions. But as De Bruijn argued, so this corresponds actually to this notion of definitional equality corresponds to mathematical practice. So in mathematical practice, I mean, we have logical steps that are of the form this holds by definition. And how do we convince of such a step? Where we'll unfold the definition and we check that we have the same form. So this notion of definitional equality, so it's a key feature of dependent type theory. And the fact, so like in dialectica, the fact that definitional equality is decidable is essential because convertibility, I mean, the type checking is reduced to convertibility checking. And since convertibility is decidable, type checking is decidable. So the judgment M is of type A is analytic, decidable. So it contains all informations for us to be able to see if M of type A holds or not. By contrast, so a judgment like A is true is not analytic because we are lacking some information to convince ourselves that a proposition is true. I mean, we need the proof. So, I mean, in Scott's paper on dependent type theory, he refers to Kreisel for the importance of this analytic character of M, of the judgment M is a proof of A. Okay, and so I've seen the reference to also the paper, I mean the book, this book where Kreisel had a paper on mathematical logic, and but I didn't have time to check if this sentence was there. But I mean the main message is we should recognize a proof when we see one. So the judgment M is a proof of A should be decided. So, so this is an important feature of type theory, and so in particular, so we have the following. So if M is a proof of A, and A is definitionally equal to B, then M should be also a proof of B. Okay. And this is an important rule, but also technically, it's a subtle rule, especially when we try to build model of type theory. And so the main problem in building model of type theory is actually to check this rule. And it's even more complex if we want intentional model of type theory. So possible definition of intentional model of type theory is that such a model should be a syntactic translation of the system into itself. And so what I'm going to present is some examples of such intentional models. And the first example is so Friedman's translation, so done in type theory. So I think you are all familiar, I mean, with Friedman's translation. So it's a way to prove that if E is a sigma 01 formula, if we can prove not E, then actually E is also provable. And the way it works is by elegant syntactical transformation. So if A is atomic, we translate A as A or this formula E that we want to prove. We translate absurd propositions by E, and then it's compositional. So A implies B is interpreted by A implies B, and so on for all connectives. And then you prove that if A is provable, then the translation of A is provable. And you prove also that if A is sigma 01, then the translation of not A is equivalent to A or E. Okay. So the question is it possible to do this in type theory? And I had in mind actually the following example, so a simple example due to Ulrich Berger and Helmut Schwichtenberg, so that illustrates, I mean, how we use this technique. So So it's to prove the following. So if f is an unbounded sequence of natural number, and we have a given bound of f of 0, we want to find from this n, natural number n, so that f of n is less or equal than b, and b is strictly less than f of n plus 1. And it's possible to prove this by contradiction. So we assume that there is no n, so we will have this statement, and then this can be rewritten as this. And then since we have b is a bound for f of 0, we prove for all n, f of n is less or equal than b. And we have a contradiction with the fact that f is unbounded. So that's a proof by contradiction of this, that there exists an n satisfying this property. And the question is, well, what is the n which is implicitly contained in this argument? And that's an example where we can apply the Friedman's translation. And actually, so it's possible to do it with modified realizability. And what one see, what's going on in the computation, in the algorithm. So it's a functional program, but it's use an exception monad essentially. So so one can wonder, I mean, can we build the analog of Claes-Lie category exception monad, but for a dependent type theory? And the problem is that it looks like one needs some form of extensional equality. So when I looked at this, I didn't think it was possible to do it in dependent type theory. So the question is to generalize these translations, but to type theory instead of doing it for a Peano arithmetic. And so I was really surprised when, so there was a paper in a work of Pierre-Marie Pedro and Nicolas Tabarot in 2017 that was able to show, actually, to do this translation in type theory. And that's the main thing that I want to present, because it's both technically simple, and so a posteriori it was clear that one could do it, but it's surprising, so that actually there is some surprise that one can do it. So how does this translation work? So we defined a proof relevant property of A. And what is this proof relevant property of a type A? It is this type exponential, so e to the A. Okay. And if E is in the smallest universe U0, we have that C of A is of type UI, if A is of type UI. Okay. And then it's very simple to define the operation. So in that the types satisfying this proof relevant property A are closed by dependent product by sigma types, and the universe of all types satisfying C itself satisfies the properties. And when one does this, so I mean, for the universe, for instance, so I don't go into the detail, but there are different ways of building this constant, showing that the collection of types satisfying C itself satisfying C. Okay, so one does this, and once one has built this constant, then surprise, so there is a translation of type theory in type theory that corresponds to Friedman's translation, but it's much more elegant because in this setting, because it's a uniform translation over types, where types and terms are treated uniformly in some way. So what is this translation? Translation of a variable is a variable. Translation of an application is an application. And translation of an abstraction is an abstraction. But notice that so it's not quite uniform in the types and the term. So there, I don't use the translation of A, but I use only the first component of the translation of A. Okay, and what's the idea? The idea is that a type will be interpreted by a type with a proof that the type satisfies this property C. So that's quite natural translation, but it's really actually surprising that it works so well technically. So how do you translate a pi type? Well, it's translated by first component is simply pi, but then the second component is you use the fact, the proof that types satisfying the property C are closed by dependent product. And the same for a sigma type and the same for universe. And then how do you translate context? A context is translated simply by context itself. So it's quite elegant. And then you prove that if M is of type A in this context, then the translation of M is of type, the first component of the translation of A in the translation of this context. So it's a purely syntactical transformation. And then, like for Friedman's translation for Peano arithmetic, you prove that if A is a sigma 01 formula, then translation of not of A is equivalent to A plus E. So you get that if M proves not E, translation of M will prove translation of not E, so which is E plus E. So you get a proof of E in type theory, in the starting type theory. And what I want to stress is that, and this is a feature of all these translations, is that they work as well if you start from a type theory with a type of all types. So technically, I mean, this universe, it's used uniformly. So if you start with a type theory with a type of all type, you will translate it into itself by this translation. Okay. So each type is interpreted by so a type together with a proof that this type satisfies the properties. And one key point, which surprised me when I looked at this, but it's essential. I mean, it's important actually for the translation to work, is that we don't need in this translation. So in order to check this key rule of type conversion, it does not matter actually how there's constants showing that I mean, dependent product and dependent sum and universe preserves the property C. We never need to access this second component to check this rule, okay? Because it's the way we interpret M is of type A. We look only at the first component of A. But still, this second component, I mean, this transformation, it's a really complex induction on the types, so it will come in the computations, but still we can check this rule. So this rule is validated by this interpretation. And how do we deal with inductive types? So if we have a type, so inductive types is characterized by the list of constructor, and all you have to do for translating inductive type is that you add an extra constructor, which is exist, like an exception, from E, the given type E, to the inductive types you want to define. So not will be interpreted now by an inductive type with 3 constructors. You add this extra constructor exist. And then, so you can interpret NATREC with expected computation rules. And so technically, there is an issue with large eliminations. When you do this, you try to build a model of type theory, but this issue here doesn't arise. So, and the same can be done for all inductive types. So you get in this way an interpretation of type theory with inductive types into itself. And so what may be surprising is that exactly the same pattern appears in models of univalence. So that's actually when you look back, when I look back at the way model of univalence are built, even I mean Voivovsky model, it follows actually this pattern. So in this case, so what you build is you build first a preshift model, and then you have this property C. So C of A of type UI, like this exception model. But for the model of univalence, C of A will be the property to have a Can composition operation, Can filling operation. So for Voivovsky's model, I mean, this will be proof irrelevant. This is a Can property, I mean, to satisfy its property. And for the cubical model, it's a proof relevant property. And it's exactly, but it follows the same pattern. So what you do is that you prove that this property is closed by dependent product, by dependent sum, and the universe of type having a CAN operation itself as a CAN operation. So, and then the translation proceed exactly in the same way. So you can follow the same pattern, and you have a decomposition of the model of univalence in this way. So you can decompose this model of univalence, and you have, but the fact that it works for inductive types is it's the same thing going on. Yes, and the exact, and it's the same phenomena that the exact form of this, how you justify closure of having a CAN filling operation does not matter when you check that this conversion rule is satisfied. Okay, and so you can build in this way internal models satisfying univalence, and this is quite reminiscent actually of Gödel's model, inner model of constructible sets. Okay, so in the same way that so Gödel built a model of type theory, of set theory, internal to set theory, where a set is now set together with the proof that it is constructible. So it's a model of type theory inside theory, where a type is a type together with a proof that this type has an exception, or together with a proof that this type has a CAN filling operation. But what is, so next remark is that, so there is more actually, so there are more models that follow the same pattern. So, so know that you have a model, inner model satisfying univalence. Actually, you can build, there is a way to build inner model inside this inner model, but which satisfies more property. And this is using this notion of left exact modality, which can be seen as a, I mean, a kind of a variation of the notion of idempotent monad. And this is exactly, interestingly, exactly what is needed in order to interpret the notion of Schiff models. So to give an example of such modality, so if R is a proposition, now in the homotopy theoretic sense, so you can look at the type A such that the constant functions from A to the R is an equivalence. And so this is a property of a type A. And this property, it satisfies also the closure properties that types satisfying these conditions are closed by a dependent product, dependent sum, and the universe of type satisfying this property is satisfied itself with this property. And this is a nice last proof of this. Actually, it uses univalence. So you need univalence to prove this. Okay, and what you can, so you can apply this technique, and you build an inner model inside this inner model, which is no model of types that are modal for this modality. So that are types such that the constant functions from A to the R is an equivalence. And so this was, and what you can prove automatically, like what happens for Gödel's inner model of constructible sets, you have to prove that this inner model satisfies V equal L. There you can prove that this inner model satisfies univalence itself. Okay, so you get a new model of univalence inside this model of univalence. And this was described essentially in the PhD thesis of Kevin Quirin, this construction. And we have been using it for building constructive Schiff models of type theory. So there are 3 examples of inner model of type theory that are syntactical translation of type theory into itself, and that can be used so to generalize Friedman's translation. and to build model of univalence. And so to be complete, so there are also other kind of such syntactic translations, so that are older actually, but not so much older. So it was systematically done around 11 years ago. So by and it's also so parametricity model, and this can be seen an underlying actually takes proofs of normalization with computability. And so the idea is that you prove internally, you can prove by such a syntactic translation that terms of type theory are parametric. And actually this can be seen as a purely syntactical expression of what Reynolds was doing actually when he was working on parametricity. So for instance, I mean, the fact that the identity function, polymorphic identity function, is parametric is seen by this so translation. So the translation is you interpret a type by a type together with a predicate, and this predicate expresses elements, a parametricity predicate. And there again, so it's a purely syntactical translation, and it works for universe. And you have the same pattern that it works. It's completely, this translation is completely uniform in the universe, so it will work as well if you have a type of all type. So, so the way, and once again, so like for this inner model, you can show that if you start from a model that satisfies univalence, when you apply this syntactical interpretations, you get a new model which satisfies automatically univalence. So it's like when you check that induction principle is satisfied in the double negation translation. So you use that Peano arithmetic satisfy, Heyting arithmetic satisfy induction principle, and you use this to check that double negation translation preserves, will interpret induction principle. So it's the same thing going on here. Univalence is automatically satisfied. And then, so I said that for a model of univalence, you use Preschiff model, but so I claim that we are still in this framework of intentional model, because the model, Preschiff models that we are using are really a special kind of Preschiff model. So it's nominal models actually, where the restriction maps of the Preschiff model we are using are substitutions. So they have a syntactical flavor. And we use the fact that so substitution is associative up strictly, so up to definitional equality. So actually, those models, Preschiff models that we're using to justify univalence, I claim are still in this intentional framework. And so there is another class of models that we have been using, so, and that was described in Ambush talk this morning. So the model used for showing normalization. So there's this idea, so goes back to so this first presentation of type theory, first published presentation of type theory. So there, I mean, in this paper, so he used, he didn't consider actually what happens with variable. He was using constant. So if you want to deal with variable, you have to use, I mean, you can do it with a Preschiff model where the world or context. And there is still this phenomena that the restriction maps are substitutions. So you still are in an intentional framework. So like the models that are used for univalence. And so I will end with a question. So I think, which to connect it with the theme of this meeting. So I think it will be interesting to use all that has been done also, so what was described this morning also, So now we have a lot of experience with internal model of type theory. So it should be the case that if we have a type of all type, we should get internally a model of type colon type. So can we use actually Gödel's second incompleteness theorem to deduce another paradox with U colon U in type theory? And I will end by these questions. Thank you for listening.